one of the things that I also look at is right now, you and I were just talking about this, but right now, let me pull this up. Right now, one of the things that we're seeing is people that have moved. So you and I, oftentimes, we have clients that come in and they go, hey, one of our goals right when we retire is we want to downsize. And I tell people, I go, hey, are you downsizing to save money, or are you downsizing just because you want a smaller place? And I can't tell you how often people tell me they're downsizing because they want to reduce their cost. And I tell them, you're not going to reduce your cost based on the numbers that I'm seeing. And they'll go from a 4-bedroom house to a 2-bedroom townhome. And between the HOA and the higher interest rates, they're spending the same amount and more. And what's interesting about it is a handful of them didn't believe me. And they get there and they go, hey, if I would have known this, I would have stayed in the bigger house.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that, that you and I, the group of people that we serve, are in and nearing retirement. So one of the things I'd encourage you to do is, before you make an assumption that downsizing or right sizing is going to reduce, your cost, I would have all the numbers. I would have everything written out. I would look at the rate that you have versus the rates that you would have. If you're paying cash, I don't know how people do it, but we find that people will move into a beautiful brand new townhome, and over the first 3 years, their HOA goes up 20%, 30%, 40%. So one of the things to look at is some of those associations, I know from conversations with clients that I've had, some of them have bylaws where they can't go up more than a certain percent each year. So those are just some of the things that I would consider from experience of working with some of the families that we serve.
Yeah, I think we could probably fill a whole podcast episode just by talking about downsizing going awry. It seems like a great idea, but there's so many factors that go into that. One thing that I found was interesting, the Case Schiller Index, it actually, it's like the leading measure of U.S. residential real estate prices. So it tracks like the changes in value of residential real estate nationally. But what it shows is that prices have actually increased by 46% from January 2020 to 2024. And it's actually requiring first-time home buyers, they need to make twice as much as they did 4 years ago to afford a home, which is crazy. So affordability, obviously that's a factor as well. So something to consider. I know that for many of our clients, obviously you're not a first-time home buyer, and a lot of these, really affect first-time home buyers that are looking for their initial home purchase. But for us, when it comes to downsizing, a lot of the same things apply too.
Well, and alongside that, so a lot of you have heard of Redfin before. So in March, one of the things that they said is that you would have to make twice as much money to afford the same house as you did 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Think about that, especially people coming out of college, people that maybe that you're just starting a family, and now to buy the same home that your older sibling bought 4 years ago, you have to make twice as much to afford that house for it to make sense. So one of the things that, that basically that article was saying is that in order for things to get back in order, we're going to have a recession. And if you look at where inflation is, you look at interest rates, it feels like it's around the corner.
Yeah, which is interesting, right? Nobody wants a recession, but if you're talking in terms of home affordability, a recession might be what it takes today to get those prices down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're coming into not knowing. So we know that as of right now, Trump's tax plan sunsets in 2025. We don't know if we're going to have a Kamala Harris president. We don't know if we're going to have a Donald Trump. And normally, we're not looking at such extremes. But the reason I say that is depending upon, what happens, I don't think it's if we have a recession, but it's when. Is it sooner or is it later? And, in my opinion, when I look at this, it's almost would be healthier if we had it sooner than having it delayed by printing more money. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, it's common to talk about kicking the can down the road and delaying the inevitable. And sometimes maybe it's better to bite the bullet. Now, I don't know if there is the possibility of a softer landing, and that would be best case scenario, but yeah, it might be something that's inevitable, and maybe it's better to just to realize that that's coming anyways, and just prepare for that. And for a lot of us, when it comes to preparing for that, we work with retirees. We're talking about preparing in terms of income, drawing from the correct places, making sure that your portfolio is set up in a way that you can weather that type of storm. So, everybody, for the most part, if the Fed comes out, during one of those 8 meetings and they say that they're going to lower rates, probably that's going to have a positive impact on the market. In fact, I think that stocks went up by about 2% most recently whenever the Fed indicated that we're going to have, I think, 2 cuts for this year. But what it did also is it pushed yields on the 10-year Treasury down by about 25 basis points. So, depending on how you've structured your plan in terms of income, if you're relying on a lot of the rates that you see today in the money market funds, CDs, or maybe various interest-bearing investments or instruments, that could really affect you. I know everybody has a different plan for income and retirement. Trey mentioned that a lot of people, I think 50% rely on Social Security. Maybe you have pension income, or maybe you've created your own pension through the use of annuities. But some people, for them, it's mostly just interest-bearing investments. Maybe they're relying on dividends, right? Or other forms of interest to fund their retirement. And that can really have an effect on a portion of your income. So, if you're a saver, you don't necessarily want rates to come down, because for the first time in a very long time, you're actually getting a decent rate of return. So, of course, it could affect a lot of people in retirement, especially as people in retirement tend to be more conservative, and maybe they're more attracted to, having a substantial amount of their income in treasuries or a money market fund.